All right, Mosaic, good morning. I'm going to be honest with you. I had to practice the cool handshake I just did with Jonathan because I'm the kind of person that if you go for like knuckles, I'll shake your hand and then we switch and it gets awkward. I'm so honored and like humbled and very, very excited to be here with you right now. That is because even though you have no idea who I am, I know a lot about you. Through Carl and Jonathan, I've been aware of Mosaic for years and years now, and I've been a big fan of your community from afar because, like Jonathan said, like I think our hearts beat in the same way. Like I really do believe it's a sin to make Jesus boring or inaccessible for people who like don't understand him yet. You believe that. I believe that church should be a group of people who can be honest and vulnerable about their brokenness, but then also honest about their redemption, which makes you like filled with compassion for the world around you. You believe the same thing. Like our hearts beat similarly. And then I also want you to hear just right off the bat from me that not only am I a massive fan of Mosaic, but I am a massive fan of Jonathan. This dude is an amazing thinker, amazing. Yeah. By placing Jonathan in leadership over Mosaic, God's being very good to you guys. So take care of him, take care of his family. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that even though we don't know each other, like I've watched you a lot online and I think we could be best friends, is like what I'm trying to say. If anyone ever uses that as a pickup line, don't date them. They're creepy people. Okay, enough fanboying from me. Here's why I'm here today. About a month ago, Jonathan texted me and he's like, dude, would you want to come out and teach at Mosaic in March? That question was a no-brainer for me. I was like, yes, please. I told him, let me just, go check my calendar, make sure I'm free. I was free, good to go. And then Jonathan texts me back and he's like, great, we're going to do this series called Body Language, Theology of the Body, and your week is all about how we have bodies of desires and we need boundaries. And I was like, cool. Let me just double check my calendar, and I checked and I was still free, so here I am. I'm teasing. I actually have a possibly foolish lack of fear when it comes to tackling uncomfortable subjects. And I also think that by the end of today, you're going to see that this isn't as uncomfortable as you think it is right now. But also, I've done this job long enough to know what just happened in the room. And you can decide whether I'm right or not. But you heard me say that we're going to talk about how we have bodies of desire. You heard the word desire, and your brain went negative right away. Right? Because in the typical church context, like desires equal bad and nasty things that you're supposed to stay away from. All right? On top of that, our minds jumped to sex, because sex is definitely one of the stronger desires of the body, which means many of us, and if we're being honest, a lot of men in the room, we're squirming in our seats right now. We're trying to figure out how to look at the women we came with, like our wives or our girlfriends, or God forbid your own mother. I'm very sorry. And we're trying to figure out how to tactfully be like, I just need to duck out and go to the bathroom for not long, for 32 minutes, I've got to go to the bathroom. If that's you, take a breath, calm down. I don't believe today is headed where you think it is, but we're squirming in our seats. And I believe that one of the reasons that we're squirming in our seats right now is because typically Christians are terrible at talking about desire. This conversation is done so poorly in most Christian circles, and I believe it's done poorly because Christians love to immediately jump to the rules. Right? Just give me the do's and don'ts. What am I allowed to do over here? And then what am I not allowed to do? But honestly, if I'm just going to keep doing it, and now I know to keep it secret, if you're being honest. Like do's and don'ts. How far is too far with my girlfriend or whatever, right? It's just rules without ever getting to the heart of the matter. This is why I don't blame people who don't follow Jesus, but then look at Christians and go, why would I want to live my life that way? Right? Why would I want to shackle myself to a list of rules that seem arbitrary and inconsequential? It's because they've never seen the heart of the matter. They've only ever seen the rules, and so they view a life with Jesus as one of restriction. And honestly, shame on us. Right? Shame on us if people outside our community look at us and they see bondage instead of freedom, because freedom is supposed to be at the heart of the matter, both when it comes to desires and when it comes to setting boundaries around them. And so that's where I want to go today. I want to get to the heart of the matter instead of just rules, okay? And I want to do that by answering the why question. Like, why would putting boundaries around our desires possibly be a good thing for us, right? To answer that question, we've got to go back to the beginning of like everything, of creation. We got to go back to the first few chapters of Genesis. And Jonathan did an amazing job of covering this last week. I'm not going to be redundant. I'm not going to teach the whole thing again. I'm just going to pull a few verses out for us to look at in detail together. All right, most of us, I'm assuming, are pretty familiar with this story. First couple chapters of Genesis, God creates everything. And after every single day of creation, he looks at his handiwork and he calls his work good. He goes, day and night, good. Right? Earth, sea, and sky, good. Plants and trees and sun, moon, and stars, and birds and fish and frogs and tigers, like it's good. It's all good. Like he just really likes what he made, right? And then on the last day of creation, God designs humanity. And after creating men and women, he finally calls his creation very good. So Genesis 1:31, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And then there was evening, and then there was morning, and that was the end of the sixth day. And this idea of God creating men and women, and then for the first time saying this is very good, that fascinates me. And I want to explain why it fascinates me to you, but to do that, we've got to be like word nerds for just a couple minutes. We got to be geeks. I promise I'll keep it short, but I think it's worth it, okay? So the word that God keeps using to describe his own creation, the word good, the original Hebrew word there is tov, okay? Our English word for good can mean 1,000 different things. The Hebrew word tov means something very specific. Tov means pleasing to the 5 human senses. That's taste, touch, sight, smell, and sound, okay? Tov is the same Hebrew word that would have been used to describe food and drink and perfume or the power of a brilliant sunset or a perfectly written song or a good night's sleep. Okay, so for the first 5 days of creation, God celebrates that his work is pleasing to the 5 human senses. But by the end of day 5, there are still no humans walking around to be pleased, to enjoy the pleasing things that God created, which is why God creates human beings, and then he finally deems his work as complete and finished, and he calls it very good, very tov. And the Hebrew word for very is mayod, and mayod means powerfully strong and exceeding all expectations. All that to say, after the creation of humanity, when God's work is finally complete and done, he doesn't celebrate by saying, this is beautiful, even though it was. And he doesn't celebrate by saying, this is perfect, even though it was. Instead, God gets specific, and he celebrates by saying, this is mayod tov. Or in other words, my creation is powerfully pleasing to the human senses in ways that exceed all expectations. That's what God chose to take joy in after creation. That's what he delighted in. The fact that he created a world that can powerfully please our human senses in ways that will constantly exceed all of our expectations. Like when he was done creating, he was happy for us. He's like, you're going to love this place. And right away, I've got to make sure that we're on the same page with something, because some of us, we've got to erase like a crappy view of God that we inherited from maybe our church or family heritage or our parents or whatever, because a lot of us, we picture God as like far away in outer space, and he's got a big white beard and a big white robe, and he's usually got a big white chip on his shoulder, right? He's annoyed with you. And he's frustrated that you're constantly pursuing your desires. And so he's eternally nagging you. And he's going like, can you please just stop having fun and pray to me? That's our picture of God. That's not the picture of God that we just saw together in the first few chapters of the Bible. Instead, this is going to sound sacrilegious to some of us. That's how like brainwashed we've been by a bad view of God. What we learn in the first few chapters of Genesis is that God is a God of pleasure. He is. God is a God of many things, but one of the first things he wants you to know about himself in the first few chapters of Scripture is that God is a God of pleasure, and he wants you to worship him by enjoying his creation. And I know I've been in your seat before. I know some of us are still skeptical, so let me keep proving this point to you, okay? At the very end of Genesis chapter 1, going into the first few verses of Genesis chapter 2, God gives human beings 4 different directives, even though they're still living in perfection. Okay, he gives them 4 rules, if you would like, since Christians love rules, okay? Here they are, God's 4 directives, each one of them tied to desire and pleasure. Okay, directive number 1. God blessed them, and he said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Okay, translation, go have sex. Really, like, you've really got to go try this thing I made for you guys. You guys are going to love it, right? Sex is meod tov, right? It's powerfully pleasing to the human senses in ways that exceed all expectations. Husbands, on the next date night, you can try saying that to your wife. Honey, that was meod tov. She's going to turn the light out and go to bed, but I think it's funny. So directive number 1, go have sex, okay? And I know that this command also has weight to it. It's actually pretty crazy because God is saying, hey, go raise children and like co-create humanity with me. That's pretty intense. He's like, I want you to go make more people who can enjoy me and who can enjoy the perfect, pleasing creation I made for them. The command has weight to it. It's just that God made being fruitful very fun to do, right? Like, just 5 stars. Highly recommend. Okay, so that's directive number 1. Directive number 2 from God. He says, fill the earth and subdue it. And rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So translation, this is also crazy. God is saying, paradise isn't even done yet. Like, you and I, we just got started. So everything in creation is yours to steward, and I want you to join me in the powerfully pleasing work of creating paradise together. It's pretty awesome. Directive number 3. Okay, then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, and they will be yours for food. Translation, go have a good meal. I made eating very fun to do. You're going to love it. Get out there, have a hot and spicy Cheez-It or a crab cake or whatever. Go eat some good food. And if we're being honest, of all the powerfully pleasing desires that humans have, like a good meal is very near the top of the list. Okay, so Go have sex and go help create paradise with me and go have a good meal. And then 4th and final directive is this. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. And so on the 7th day, he rested from all of his work. And God blessed the 7th day and he made it holy because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. This is where we get the idea and tradition of Sabbath, which you guys had a whole sermon on that back in January. I don't need to repeat that, but this is one day every single week designed for you to do nothing except for rest and enjoy God's powerfully pleasing creation. God called that kind of a rest day holy, the first thing in the Bible described as holy. Here's the point. When humanity was still living in a state of total perfection, God still chose to give men and women 4 directives, and each one of them are tied to and revolve around how to sustain, steward, enjoy, and co-create his powerfully pleasing world. What does that mean? It means God's work of creation was not finished until he created humanity, specifically because you and I were created to be beings of desire. That's why we were made. Like, only human beings can desire God. And only human beings can enjoy God's powerfully pleasing creation and then turn and worship him for it, which means that you can erase whatever you learned from that one church or that one teacher or that one youth pastor or whatever. It is not a bad thing that you have a body of desire. On the contrary, it is the reason you were created. God desires that you desire him. If you don't want to take my word for it, the very first question and answer in the Westminster Shorter Catechism, which is kind of like a handbook on doctrine and theology, the first Q&A, I love it so much, is this. The question is, what is the chief end of man? Or in other words, what is the ultimate purpose of being a human being? And the answer is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And so basically, God created all of creation, he designed all of creation to blow minds, and then he designed you to have your mind blown. It's like God intentionally gave you a body designed to desire, to desire pleasure and satisfaction and joy and food and drink and sex and rest and beauty. You've been designed to desire those things. Even more, you've been designed with a body that's capable of satisfying those desires through God's powerfully pleasing creation. And so all of creation is a gift to you from the good God of pleasure. Yes, sex. Okay, also like a perfectly grilled medium rare steak, right? Or a glass of bourbon to wash it down with, or the smell of puppy breath. What's up with that? So it just smells good for like 2 months, and then it takes a hard turn. But everything designed like as a gift to you, the way that caterpillars turn into butterflies, or the way that the same 12 musical notes have created an endless catalog of music, or the feeling you get when you summit a mountain and look out over the valley, or the way that laughter can lift your spirit, like all of it designed to dazzle us. Why? Because God he's meod tov. He's powerfully pleasing beyond all expectations. And so he created an entire world to amaze you to the point of turning your heart, soul, mind, and strength to the person who created it. God is a God of pleasure, and he wants you to worship him by enjoying his creation. And then that brings me to the question of like, okay, so, well then what's the problem? Right? And why are Christians and teachers and pastors and people like me, why are they always talking about boundaries? Well, we can start to tackle that now as long as we're all on the same page of the heart of the matter when it comes to desire, because the heart of the matter is that God, the God of the Bible, is the furthest thing possible from a killjoy. He is not out to ruin your good time. Okay? So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that ever since Genesis chapter 3, humanity now lives in a state of sin. Okay, sin is a word you almost always hear in church, and it's a scary word, and we picture hellfire and brimstone and sweaty pastors banging their Bibles or whatever. So what does sin mean? Sin is this: it's the state you live in every single day, and you already know it. Like I don't know up from down, and I don't know right from wrong, and I don't know freedom from slavery, and I try to do the right thing, but it ends up being the wrong thing, and I keep tripping over myself all the time. We're just lost, and we're broken. And one of the results of our sinful nature is that your new default, mine too, our new cruise control, is that we try to satisfy our desires through our methods and means instead of God's. Right? In his letter to the Romans, Paul does an awesome job of summing up the sinful nature of humanity. He says this, he says, we, so human beings, exchanged the truth of God for a lie. And then we worshiped and served created things instead of the Creator. In other words, one result of our sinful nature is that we take the heart of the matter, which remember is that God is a God of pleasure and he wants us to worship him by enjoying his creation. We take the heart of the matter, we distort it, we deface it, and it becomes this like ugly look-alike that goes like this. We worship whatever brings us pleasure. And whenever we worship the things that bring us pleasure, what happens just naturally is we take the governor, like the limiter, off of the engine of our desires, right? We just want to get as much of that thing as we possibly can, and we call it freedom, but the ironic result is that it leads us to slavery and bondage. And we can see this in our current culture. All right, put your critical hat on and think about American culture. American culture still worships the same three things that have enslaved men and women since the very beginning of time. American culture worships money and sex and power. I would even add to that list for modern America that we also worship food and entertainment, which we'll talk about. I would also add to that list that we worship politics, all right? But I know we're like an hour from Washington, D.C., and so for this first time, let's just get to know each other. Like, if Jonathan ever wants to have me back, we'll talk politics next time, but let's just be friendly right now. So our culture worships sex for the sake of sex. No more restrictions, no more boundaries. I'm going to pursue sexual freedom. But the result has been enslavement. Like that is lots of our stories. You know, like for some of us, that looks like an addiction to pornography, or for others of us, it's an unhealthy obsession with our physical appearance, or for some of us, it's like we've got a history of one-night stands that has left us feeling hollow and empty and all used up. God doesn't want that for you. I don't want that for you. And then for others of us, we're like totally shackled and chained to shame and guilt and pain, not for anything sexual that we did, but because of something that was done to us. Right? Someone else worshiped sex. They took it out on us. I've been spending the rest of my life trying to pick up the pieces from it. Sex is worshiped in our culture, sex for the sake of sex, but it has led to slavery for so many of us. Money is worshiped in our culture. How much money is enough money? The answer is always a little more. So we go off to go make more money, and we become workaholics at the expense of our relationships with our family and our friends, and we become addicted to the things that money can get us, and we convince ourselves that we can purchase peace. Just that as long as we get the right house and the right neighborhood and the right car and our kids are in the right school and we have the right clothes, but you already know this. No matter how stacked your bank account is, you still have not found peace. Power is worshipped in America. On the one hand, power is at the root of literal slavery all throughout history. Power is at the root of the Me Too movement and cancel culture. This is our culture's best attempt to hold people of power accountable for their actions. But then even in the normal day-to-day parts of our lives, power worship is everywhere. Power worship is the reason that we're self-involved. Right? Can't stop thinking about ourselves or thinking about what other people are thinking about us. Power is the reason that our anger gets uncorked whenever we feel disrespected. Right? Power is the reason that we've become overbearing helicopter parents. And then you add to that the worship of food and entertainment that's dug its claws into America. Think about food. Be honest about it. Some of us, we bow down and we worship food as a provider of comfort, and so we overeat. And then others of us, we bow down and we worship food as a provider of control, and so we restrict what we eat, even though both of those options are destroying our bodies. Then you add to that, there's some of us, it's like, dude, we don't even know how to have a good time anymore without a drink in our hands. And then you've got entertainment, right? You and I are living in the binge-watching era. And studies show, this blew my mind, okay? Studies show that if nothing changes, the average American, not like the extreme American, the average American will spend 78,000 hours of their lifetime on streaming services. Okay? That's not even screen time. That's just streaming services. There are 6,000 waking hours in a year, which means the average American will spend 13 years of their waking life on Netflix. That is 13 years that could have been spent in quality time with your friends or family. 13 years that could have been spent learning a new skill or hobby, or spent outside, or spent doing anything. It's 13 years of knees on the ground, laying prostrate worship devoted to Stranger Things. Or is it cake? Right? That one gets a pass because that show's awesome if you've not seen it. Every time I'm like, that's no way that's cake, that's a telephone. That's cake? What in the world? I think you get it. America has been literally built on the vision of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? The pursuit of pleasure for the sake of pleasure. But what happened is we removed the governors from the engine of our bodily desires, all in the name of don't tell me how to live my life and don't tread on me or whatever. But then under the banner of freedom, we ended up enslaving our bodies to the unrestricted pursuit of pleasure for the sake of pleasure. And anytime we worship the things that bring us pleasure, the result is always more addiction, obsession, and slavery. I mean, I'm at the point where, whether you believe in Jesus or not, I don't think it sounds insane to suggest that maybe it would be a good thing to place some healthy boundaries around the desires of our bodies, not in the name of restriction, not in the name of Puritanism, but instead in the name of true freedom and true pleasure. And that is why Jesus issues commands. This is why he gives us do's and don'ts. It's not because he wants to place arbitrary restrictions on your life. And it's not because he wants to put you through some like existential pass or fail exam to see if you can earn your way into heaven, right? Well, you cussed, like, go to hell now. That's not, I know that Christians live and act that way a lot. That's not the heart of Jesus. Jesus told us his heart. And he was clear and he was blunt. He said this, he goes, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that you may have life and have it to the full, like have a full life. Jesus told us his heart. He was honest with us, and he didn't pull any punches. He said that your world and your culture and your enemy is a thief who wants to do nothing but steal and kill and destroy you. And this thief wants to hold your hand and walk you toward addiction and obsession and slavery, and he's going to be whistling and smiling and skipping the whole way and calling the journey freedom. But then Jesus says, I, on the other hand, I want to lead you to real freedom and real life. The heart of the matter behind why anyone would ever live their lives within the boundaries defined by Jesus, the heart of the matter is freedom. This is what Paul says to the Galatians. He says this, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. And that might sound redundant or something, but some of us, you need to hear that today. You need to be reminded that Jesus set you free so that you could live like a free person. No more stumbling around and going like, there's so many things I'm not allowed to do anymore. That's like not what your life is supposed to be about. Your life is supposed to be about freedom. It's an amazing statement, which is why Paul follows that with a challenge and a warning. He says, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. And so, because of that, stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. What does that mean? Well, it means that your eternal freedom, whether or not you go to heaven when you die, like that's sealed and finished for anyone who has put their faith in Jesus, okay? And by the way, side note, if you're here right now and you don't have your faith in Jesus and you're not sure what you think, you're just here to kind of navigate it and figure it out, I'd tell you welcome. All right, if I know anything about Mosaic, it's that you're safe here. Like if you want to go sit in the back in the dark and not talk to anyone just so that you can observe and figure out who Jesus is and what he wants for your life, do that here. It's a great place to do that. For others of us, if we don't have our faith in Jesus yet, but we're starting to think about that jump, that connection card that Jonathan talked about, you can fill it out and check the baptism box, even though that sounds like too much right now. All that's going to happen is someone's going to call you this week and talk to you about what next steps of faith could look like for you. You're not committing to anything other than a conversation. Okay? But back to my point, for those of us who have put our faith in Jesus, our eternal freedom, whether or not we go to heaven when we die, is on lock. Okay? You can really stop worrying about it. Okay? You can stop trying to earn it. You're not powerful enough to, okay? And you can stop freaking out that you're going to lose it every single time you make a mistake. That's why we have a God of grace upon grace upon grace. He knows you're going to stumble along the way. He's going to pick you back up. You're going to keep walking. Okay, so our eternal freedom is on lock. However, whether or not we get to enjoy that eternal freedom before we die, in the here and now, in our lives, in our experiences, in our families, and in our bodies, that is a freedom that you and I have to work at. We have to stand firm. How do we stand firm and resist the enslaving potential of desire? We do that by obedience to the boundaries defined by Jesus, because Jesus was just honest with us, and he said that your freedom is going to be directly tied to the boundaries that you're willing to honor. And he was honest. He said the whole ollie oxen free, do whatever you want lifestyle is going to lead you to slavery, but my boundaries are going to lead you to freedom. And he knows, whether we realize it yet or not, that the way that we're living parts of our lives, it's just all it's doing is stealing our joy and diminishing our pleasure and robbing us of freedom. And he doesn't want that for you. And so he's trying to shake us awake and get us to realize that until we live within his boundaries, you and I are only going to ever enjoy a shadow of what an abundant life and freedom could look like. And so whenever Jesus convicts you, he convicts you of a desire that's gone off the rails in your life, he's not doing that to guilt trip you. Okay, he put your guilt on his back and it got nailed to the cross and it died with him. Okay, he's not trying to put more guilt on your plate. Instead, he's convicting you because he wants freedom for you. And so, for example, some of us are going like, dude, chill. Like, I'm no alcoholic, right? Like, I like to party with my friends on the weekends, and honestly, like, we have a blast and no one gets hurt and I don't see anything wrong with it. It's like, okay, I believe that you don't see anything wrong with it. But Jesus is saying there is a version of like deep, intimate, long-lasting friendship that has nothing to do with getting blasted on Friday night with your buddies. And he's saying that like you will never get to enjoy that kind of friendship and that kind of freedom until you figure out how to connect with someone in a way that doesn't revolve around beer pong. And be honest with yourself. Like, isn't it at least possible that putting a boundary around how many drinks you kick back in order to just like once in a blue moon genuinely talk about the burdens that your friends have so that you can help each other carry them, like isn't it possible that that could lead to better friendships than you have right now? For some of us, Jesus is saying like there is a version of true, deep, like deeply rooted peace that has nothing to do with numbing yourself or distracting yourself from your problems. And Jesus goes like, I want that for you, but you're never going to enjoy that peace or enjoy that piece of my freedom as long as you're smoking yourself into oblivion or binge watching Netflix until you're cross-eyed. And he goes, isn't it possible that putting boundaries around your screen time, for example, and choosing to bring your problems and anxieties to God in prayer as opposed to drowning them out with more reality TV, like isn't it possible that that could lead to less anxiety and more peace than you're currently experiencing? And then for others of us, he's going, listen, there is a version of intimacy that you have not tasted yet. You haven't. There's this version of being truly one with someone and truly seen and truly experienced. And Jesus is going, I want that for you. I made that for you. But you're not going to find it on Pornhub. And you're not going to find it on OnlyFans. And you're not going to happily stumble into it by stumbling out of a bar with a stranger. And again, be honest with yourself. Even in a world that says that sexual restriction or boundaries is a bad thing, isn't it possible that putting some boundaries around your sexual desires, boundaries around when you are allowed alone on your phone or computer, boundaries around what kind of men and women you're willing to date, isn't it possible that those boundaries could lead to deeper intimacy and a better spiritual connection than you've ever had with anyone before? Jesus is saying, yes, very, very possible. Jesus is saying, this is the only reason I'm telling you to live this way in the first place. If I was asking you to live this way so that you could earn your own forgiveness, then I didn't need to die in the first place. The only reason I'm telling you to live this way is because I want freedom for you and life to the full. Listen, even the Garden of Eden had a perimeter. Okay, even perfection had a boundary, and Jesus is saying that his boundaries are they're designed to show you where freedom exists so that you can go to town in that boundary, right? And then it's designed to protect us from, like Paul said, like being burdened again to a yoke of slavery. And so how do we do this? How do we live within the boundaries Jesus gave us for freedom? Okay, well, if that's you, all right, and you're serious about making some changes and standing firm, the first thing I would tell you is this: you should make Mosaic a priority in your life. Okay? I don't work here. I've got no ties. This isn't a commercial. I genuinely believe this for you. You should make this place a priority. Okay? No more of the whole like, I'm going to sleep in on Sunday, I'll catch it online. That's great for when you're sick and stuff. Be here on Sunday. Because what you're going to find is a community of people we're trying our best to stand firm in the freedom that Jesus outlined us. And we're doing that by just every single week kind of marking new boundaries on the maps of our lives so that we can figure out how to enjoy our freedom. Jump into this place, get in a small group, volunteer here. Like, surround yourself with other people who are genuinely trying to stand firm. Some of us, you want me to be real practical. You're right? You're like, well, I'm already at church. I get it. So what do you want me to do today? Like, what is the boundary I should put up in my life today? Here's the truth. You already know what that is. Okay, I don't. I'm not your Holy Spirit. I'm just some dude from Colorado, all right? You already know what it is. Okay, you know the thing that's keeping you from freedom. You know the desire that's off the rails. Like, you already know what it is. I'm just here from Colorado to encourage you to stand firm, dude. Be courageous. Be courageous enough to cut that thing out of your life and then just see what Jesus does with that kind of obedience. And then one more thing, and then I promise I'll pray and I'll get off the stage. One more practical idea. This is going to be something that you think is not deep enough on first glance. In my opinion, this is one of the more deep, spiritual practices you can engage in. Because here's the truth. You can't currently enjoy your freedom if you're only ever focused on the desires that have become distorted and disordered, and you've got to rein back into control. Work on those. I would never in a million years discourage you from that. Work on those, but then also at the same time, what brings you pure joy and pure pleasure? What I mean is, what is that experience or that pastime, that relationship, that thing that when you engage in it, you just can't help but go dear God, thank you so much for giving this thing to me. Here's what I challenge you to do. Go and experience that thing today and tomorrow and enjoy it and take pleasure in it and then thank God and worship Him for it. Enjoy your freedom. For some of us, that means you probably need to take a break for the rest of today. Take a Sabbath, right? Put away your to-do list. What are you going to get done today? Put it away. Turn off your notifications. Don't do the dishes or the laundry or the yard. All that stuff waiting for you tomorrow. Today, just rest. For some of us, it means we need to have a good laugh with our kids today, right? Because I'm in it with you. I'm in the trenches with you. I'm a parent. My kids are 9, 8, and 5, so I'm insane all the time, right? And I know what it's like to constantly worry about, I'm screwing 3 human beings up, constantly every day. I understand that. But here's the truth. At the end of the day, when they leave your house forever, they will not measure you based on how hard you worked for your company, and they will not measure you by how often you worried about your own parenting. They're going to measure you by the time you spent with them. Go home and have a good time with your kids. Have a good laugh with them. What is the thing that will help you to experience your Jesus-earned freedom? Some of you got to schedule a vacation or go on a hike or call your parents or read a good book. Some of you, it can be as simple as go eat a donut. I'm serious. When is the last time you've had, donuts are delicious, okay? Mayo tov. And it sounds ridiculous, but I mean this. This is an act of spiritual discipline. After this, you just go, you get in your car, you go to Krispy Kreme, you order a donut, you eat it, and then you thank God for being the God of great pleasure. That's a spiritual practice. What is the thing? What I'm encouraging you to do is don't just know it and don't just remember it, but instead find a way to live out the truth, because the truth is that Jesus set you free so that you could live like a free person and enjoy your freedom. So yes, begin bringing those distorted, enslaving desires back into the boundaries Jesus gave you, because that leads to freedom. But then also at the same time, get out there and enjoy the things that are within Jesus' boundaries of freedom. For the love of God, meaning as a way of showing God your love. For the love of God, please learn how to truly enjoy your life and your freedom. Okay, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing one more song together. And while we sing that, you can take communion, right? It's in the little pockets in front of you on the chairs. It's under your feet if you're on the front row. You don't have to take it, but you can if you want. Communion is the way for people who follow Jesus to remember that through Jesus' death and through His resurrection, He made us free so that we could live like free people. Thank Him for what He did on the cross. Thank God for bringing Him back 3 days later. Do that while you take communion. And then I'd also encourage you to, while you're reflecting on that, I would remind yourself that one thing that has not changed in a post-COVID world, where it feels like everything's changed a little bit and everything's a little darker and heavier, one thing that has not changed is if you know where the boundaries are and you know where to look and you know how to truly enjoy it, I'm telling you, the world is still a beautiful place, filled with things powerfully pleasing to the human senses in ways that will exceed your expectations. So thank Jesus for your freedom, and then for the love of God, go and live in it. God, I'm so thankful for this moment and for this church and for everyone in this room right now. God, I'm so thankful for the freedom that you purchased and earned for us through your son's death on the cross and his resurrection 3 days later. God, that's what we celebrate and remember when we take communion. God, help us to trust you. Like, there's so many of these boundaries in our lives that we look at and we're like, I just don't know how that would even be good for me. Or maybe the times have changed and that's just different now. God, help us to trust you. Like, you want nothing but good for us. So help us to trust where your boundaries are and learn to live within them. God, as we pull the distorted desires in our life back into your boundaries, would you help us to do that without shame? You put shame to death on a cross, and when you came back to life, shame did not come back to life with you. So God, as we're learning to pull these things back into your boundaries, please protect us from shame. I know that when we talk about desires, our minds immediately go to our pasts and all the things that we've screwed up and all the decisions that if we could get them back, we would, but it's too late. God, protect us right now from guilt and shame. Stand strong before us while we stand firm, and give us grace upon grace upon grace. God, I love you so very much, and I love this church so very much, and I pray all of this in your wonderful Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.